if you have a gripping enough story, you don't need a massive page turn to get me to keep reading.
I love the audio story play, the old-timey, like, this is brought to you by soap.
One of the most consistent failings in indie comics is pacing the story.
People get so fancy with their layouts, not realizing it doesn't need to be.
So welcome everyone to episode 3 of Writing Prose. We of course have our amazing panel, Eric Canete, we've got Cyborg Valkyrie, we've got Mr. MK Gibson, and of course Shae. How y'all doing? And we have an amazing
Size an
lineup.
asshole. That's how things are doing. So I'm gonna start this off right.
Yes, Sai is an asshole. Very accurate. So we have 2 amazing guests. We have Mr. Jason Bascom. How are you, sir?
Groovy. How are you?
Groovy. And of course, we are joined by Mr. Paul Tucker. How are you?
I'm doing swell with capital well. Thank you very much.
Fantastic. So our topic for today is going to be storytelling through artwork is kind of the loose topic. And we picked this because, you know, if anybody's ever seen Jason's art, it's very unique with a lot of emotion. And that's definitely something that I want to get more into because I am not a great artist.
You're coming up though. Yeah, you're doing really well. You improve with everything you do. It's great stuff.
I do good when it's like painting a single image. It's not bad. But when it's like, hey, do you want to, draw your own comic? That's a problem.
That's easy.
That's called consistency that I do not have.
Don't make me put Bulgy up on the screen.
Please do not do that. Nobody needs Bulgy in writing prose. Okay. So Jason, for you, what do you see as kind of like a pro or a con of storytelling mainly through art?
I mean, you could direct the viewer, you can capture the viewer, because our comics is a visual medium in general. So especially like one book I fell in love with, especially through just storytelling through art, was Silent Night, Deadly Night. It just like there was like no words in it. It was just all like panel artwork, and you could follow it. You could see the emotions they were going through as Marv was trying to get to little Nancy Callahan, I believe, and it was just powerful. And I was like, wow, you can actually make a whole book, not say a word, and still capture the essence of what you want to convey to the reader. And it was just, I love that book. A con would be if you don't do it right, nobody's gonna know what's happening. Like if you draw an expression wrong, or you put a perspective wrong, or an action lines, it could totally just make the viewer just be like, wow, this is, I don't know what's I need words, I need bubbles, I need direction, and that could totally just destroy the entire book itself. And as a visual medium, you don't want to lose them. You got to capture them right away and make sure they stay. So I mean, not every panel is going to be a powerhouse. Not everyone can convey that that emotion, or that whatever you want to get into it. And some of it's just talking heads. You're like, okay, you got to get through that. But whenever you're trying to show loss or anger or happiness or joy, push it to the limits almost. Get that expression in there. Bulge the eyes out more. Do something expressive. And make it powerful. So that way they feel it.
That's something that I think that you do really well. And a lot of it is because with a lot of your anatomy, like you have an incredible grasp of anatomy and how to like put something together, but you also know how you can break that to sell the specific look that you like. Like in book 2 where you had the rat. That is the best possible name that you could have given that character, because you look at him and he's got this super pointy nose and he's like short and squat and he does the jacked up teeth and you're just like, you look like you're a rat. Like you really do look like a rat, and it's just fitting.
Thank you.
And then he's this, disgusting torturer and you're like, yeah, I kind of expect that from you, to be honest. That's exactly what you seem like you would do.
Like you should be able to look at like the rat, or like somebody be like, this is a heroic person, this is a villainous person, just without them, even with them just standing there. Now, I mean, there's also that opposite way where you could be like, you got an anti-hero, like, wow, this guy looks like a piece of trash, and it turns out he's like an actual, solid dude. So, I mean, yeah, it depends on what you want, but usually, like, you want to see Superman, you're like, wow, that's a hero, that's somebody that's awesome, that's somebody that you could look up to. You want to see Joker and be like, this guy's villainous, like, he could just be standing there like, I don't trust this dude. So,
I'm gonna cross the street if I come across that person, like, in real life. I will cross the street to continue on my way.
Well, that's like the monologue that Mr. Glass gives in Unbreakable, that movie the from way back when, where he's like, the most villains tend to have an angular face to them and a vulpine look, whereas the heroes tend to have like squinty eye, like Clint Eastwood, and like a square jaw, and like that, just from a visual standpoint, the viewer goes hero villain, and it's innate. People just pick up on that.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
well,
I was in I can't remember what class it was. Somebody was actually teaching the term for what we're talking about, which is having it be a character design sort of like inhabiting like a snake or a rat, or in this, sometimes a bear. And because you're borrowing you're borrowing those traits in order to infuse them into your character. I'm madly trying to search for that term now, but there was a term for it, and Disney was utilizing it a lot. So when you'd have, there are those two, those two dog nappers from 101 Dalmatians. Those two guys were specifically designed that way because they wanted to take the nuances of the animal that they were being designed after, and sort of using that as a cipher to be like, oh, that's who they are, and you immediately get it just off of visuals, right?
Well, and I mean, if you're gonna go into Disney too, like you have the Robin Hood animated movie,
so good,
where literally the skeevy, snaky person is a snake. Like he literally is a snake, and every time he's like whispering in the ear something that's like kind of evil and kind of nasty and everything, and his tongue does that flicker thing in his ear, and you see people like, oh gosh, like
yeah, I love that.
And it really kind of sold that whole, this is obviously like something that you can't trust. This is obviously a character that isn't up and is definitely more on the evil side. And it was on the nose, but it was also geared towards kids. And I think that made a big difference for a lot of the kids that consumed it to go, yeah, that I can tell that this is a bad guy.
Right. Yeah. So to that point, to both of our guests, do you guys have that in mind when you're designing your characters, that level of that portion of the storytelling?
You want to take that one?
Yeah, let's
sure. Hi. Yeah, so I'll be honest, coming from a screenwriting background, I have never really thought too much about, like, I'll say I do implement it, but I had not really thought too much about character design. And so when Bump Back was starting to come into creation and whatnot, I had to pick up on a lot of that real quick. And so as far as like getting those features in and whatnot, it was not too much on my mind. Thankfully, I was working with a great artist named Brandon Palace, and so I was able to tell him like characteristics of their personalities and whatnot, and the sort of angles I'm going for, because each character is supposed to be like a horror movie cannon fodder archetype.
That's cool.
Who is getting a second chance at life.
That's cool.
And so implementing that, Brandon was able to pull more of that out than I initially thought of, but now I'm trying to get better at that for sure.
Right.
Cool.
But I mean, you still have an image in your head slightly of what you kind of picture when you're writing somebody, I mean, you it almost just pops in. Like whenever I work backwards, I don't really design too much. I more or less just start drawing, like when it came to my first books anyway, I just started drawing it, and as I was like, wow, this guy's got to be evil, so I just develop them on the page that way. So as far as character design goes, they would just, I knew how they were going to be, their characteristics, and what they were going to do later on. So I'm like, this guy can't look too good, So I developed it then and there, but I still developed the character first in my head as to what their personality was. So, if you're writing it, and you're not much of a visual person, it just pops in because we've all watched movies, we've all seen all
Sure.
these things. So
Sure.
it just hits us, we're visual creatures, unless you're fully blind.
You're saying it happened for you organically in the beginning, Jason, right? You were like, I understood the personalities that I needed to capture. You were doing it sort of like on the page. And then later on, was there a more deliberate effort for you to say, I'm going to design this ahead of time because maybe I need to draw this guy 100 times and I can't have 20 belt buckles on him? Or I need to land this right away, so I'd better have this in place now so that, I'm drawing it consistently and it's not as laborious to understand it much later. I'll give you an example, and this is really not related, but for the first time I drew one of my characters facing away from camera and walking away, and I was like, I don't know what the back of that character looks like because I've never had to draw that. And so it slows down the entire process. But to the spirit of that, what was the key differences? What were your bigger takeaways to be like, I'd rather work organically because I have a pretty intimate understanding? Or was there a space where you're like, I think I should have this worked out before I put pencil to page?
I guess it would just depend on the complexity of the design. But usually, that's where I would be constantly just going back to other pages, like, the first time I drew them on the page, and be like, what did they look like? And then I would just use that. But like, as far as like a different angle or different view, I usually just flesh it out on the page, and then I just delete it 4,000 times until I get it right, So, because I first lay it out digitally anyway. So, but when it came to my next book I have coming out with Inkspot's called Frog G, we're developing characters. We're actually doing design work. We're doing the full on the way it's supposed to go, or the way people usually do it. And but that's also because it's a collaboration. If I'm doing it by myself, I'm fortunate. I could just be like, oh, this is how it is. So I can draw it a million times this way. And my other philosophy comes to where, and this comes through storytelling in a way, you can get away with little inconsistencies in design as long as it looks really cool. If it looks dope as all get out, the person looking at it will forget, like, oh, that belt buckle's missing or something. They're just like, wow, this is so cool. So, and that also then captures the emotion that I initially wanted anyway. They're not too busy studying the page for detail. They're getting that emotion out of that page, that image that I really wanted. So I can kind of get away with it from here to there, but I usually rely on Shae or somebody to be like, hey, Jason, go back to work and do it right.
I was gonna say.
They need to have this one thing that they've had ever since the beginning.
Like that second arm. It's
useful. It's useful.
Yeah. I can't wait to read Absolute 1 and 2 here in a few.
Yes, it's gonna be so good.
Yeah. I'll be looking for belt buckles and arms, just to let you know.
You should be correct. I haven't had it.
So,
no.
Gib, I'm curious because you work in novels.
These motherfuckers. Like, I am so jealous because, if I want to write a dark and stormy night to set a tone, I have to write it out. These guys can lightning crash, tree, and it evokes the emotion, and trying to craft it from words. You said you came from a screenwriting background, right, Paul?
Yes.
So you understand that it's like lightning crashes, dark and stormy night, blah, blah, blah. But then you hope it's the transferred medium of the visual will evoke the words that you put. But when straight into novels, you don't have that luxury. Other than the book cover is that's the first introduction that people say, don't judge a book by its cover, but that's bullshit. Everybody does. Yeah. So if you have a bad cover, so sometimes they'll still take a chance on the book and find out that the story's good or the characters are good or whatever. But I wish I could I would love to go back with some of my novels and just pay for some art, or have people just go in, or even people who just like the books and draw it themselves, and I'll make a new thing so every so often here's a character, here's a scene, just to evoke a little bit of emotion. I would love to do that in time to come, because I have a visual background. I have an art background. I'm not a good artist, but I love art, and so when I developing a scene or a scenario or even a fight scene, I have to visually see it in my head, and if I don't see it, it doesn't become true on words. It's not believable. So when I read a comic, sometimes I many times when I used to read comics when I was back in the day or whenever, sometimes I would skip the writing and just look at the pictures, and I go back and just read the words, and then I would reread it multiple times to try from different directions to see, does the visual tell the story, do the words tell the story, and how do they blend together? So mostly I'm just jealous of people that can get away in a visual medium where I'm not. So.
Well, and this is the funny thing is because Cy and I are huge fans of Gibbs' work because you're really good at setting the tone and drawing out that emotion despite the fact
practicing.
that
I'm getting there. So thank you.
But the thing that's funny is the second we started talking to Gib about his books and everything, we were like, so have you ever considered adapting any of these into a graphic novel? And I'm like, I know people.
I mean, well, that's the thing is like the answer is yes, but I don't want to like just shove my shit into someone else's face and like, hey, because I have a major case of like, well, you don't believe it. What is that called?
Imposter
Imposter syndrome. So I don't think I'm good enough to begin with, too.
That's what
I don't want to push my book in somebody else's face and say, hey, read this. But like when they're busy with their own projects, if one of our guests comes along and say, hey, I read this, I enjoyed it, I would like maybe a collaboration down the line. Yeah, easy. That's it's just yes, because I'd love to do it, but I don't want to like force it upon anybody. So.
First this. Yeah. Second of all, I believe Shae and I had a discussion with you more than a year ago at this point.
It's the first I've heard of this. What are we talking about?
Yeah. About the visual guide or setting guide or what have you for your fucking Technomancer series. So,
I know.
Yeah.
Well,
how's that coming, Gib?
I don't know.
You know what?
I get my rights back at the end of the month, so when I'm full indie, then we'll find out.
Okay.
We'll make it happen. It'll be a thing.
I'll start doodling.
Okay.
Oh, gosh. we'll
Run.
And then we'll find you appropriate artist.
But no, I'm studying you guys' respective artwork, and I'm just blown away by this. And it's just like I drew a lot as a kid, but it's like anything else, like I put it away because I had to go do other things, and I wish I had kept with it. But I'm looking at everybody's respective work, and I'm
Yeah, but
you capture essence so well that
writing is an art form. So, like, I mean, you have to tell a story through your words and have the person visualize everything that you're saying. You can totally screw that up easily, like,
and I have.
Right, but you can have a great artist on the project and whatever, and if the writing is terrible, they're gonna not want to like buy the next book or get the next thing. So, I mean, like, we all grew up watching movies from the get-go, from the beginning before comics. So, like, those are the initial storytellers, or the people like who wrote movies, wrote books and stuff like that. Comics kind of like we fell into it a little bit later. Even if we were like 6 or 8 we still started watching movies first. So the people writing the screenplays or stuff like that, 20. The person, so like you all have to know how to formulate words properly, how to be descriptive properly, because you could put too many adjectives in or write the wrong thing. And so, I mean, storytelling, that is an art form in itself. So storytelling through art in that regard, like you guys don't need a visual person to convey what you need to convey, and that is talent. Like,
it's again, like just before the stream even started, we were all poking fun at each other what one person has over another person, and it's the exact same. So we're just cycling back on that topic because I wish I could. Yeah, exactly. I wish I could grab a visual perspective and bring it into the written word. The only thing when I write specifically, like, so I'll usually write 2 versions of a book, one for the ebook or the paperback, and one for the audiobook. And I might throw a few extra. If it's a comedy, I'll throw a few audio only jokes into that book because they're not.
You dick.
Sorry. It's because of I've got a good narrator and we get along really well and we get each other's sense of humor.
Right.
I'll throw a few extra jokes that only work in audio format.
Right.
Because it doesn't work in a visual form, or excuse me, reading it.
Write it out, just it loses the punch,
right.
and it makes people go, "Oh, that was humorous," as opposed to,
or it destroys the timing. Yeah.
Because in my one villains books, it's since it's fourth wall breaking to begin with, like I have the main character talking to the narrator and making fun of him. And if you don't read these next lines, you're not going to get your royalty check. So the voice actor flips back and forth with his tone, and it works in an audio format. But if you were reading it, like that's dumb. You know, I could talk to the reader, but I can't talk to the narrator because the joke doesn't work that way.
Right. But like, you know, I was saying with Paul, like he still needs to know in his head, like, because he's written scripts for, you know, stuff like movies and whatever. So he still visualizes in his head what is there. So he still has to know that storytelling through that art form. Even though he can't draw it personally, he can still picture, like, you know, Mel Gibson shooting somebody. Like, he still has to see these things. And when he gets an artist, he's like, no, dude, this is not what I have in my head. You need to do what I have in my head.
There's a documented video of Tyler Carpenter, if any of you know him, of him whining profusely because he had to draw what I had written for him, and there was just it was a, what was it? He said a 4-page script that felt like a 20-page issue for him to tackle. So no, I get it, and getting that sort of emotional.
Listen, don't take that kind of crap from artists. Don't.
Says an
Don't.
artist.
I mean, they are always gonna say that, oh, I could do this visually, I could do this on my own. They're liars, each and every single
That's
one.
why we put them second on
Right.
credit,
On
right?
credit.
That's why. That's why the writers are
Absolutely. As far down that list as humanly
Oh,
possible.
that's terrible. Well, and that's the funny
Editors
thing,
should come before anyone because they save your asses. That's all.
first.
Man.
I'm sorry, I cut you off. Go
Marshall
ahead.
Marshall
What were you
Lucas,
saying?
that's a perfect example.
I cut Paul off, dude. Right? He was talking about
Oh,
the.
oh no, you're good.
Okay.
You're good.
No, but go anyway. He's
There you go.
Yeah, ready,
Just
go.
go.
just keep
Any
talking.
topic.
Make up something.
Oh, okay. So bears. Right?
I love it.
We all love
Panda,
bears.
polar. What are we talking about?
Well,
No,
you know what? Can I follow up on something
Panda.
that you had said earlier? From screenwriting, and that's where I kind of picked up on my writing as well, because I'm used to looking at scripts working for different animated TV shows, and I'd realized that sometimes in this script they try to do a tiny bit more heavy lifting because there are things that we can get away with on the visuals to help that out, right? What's some of your challenges now that you're taking those script writing chops and applying them to it's comic books, yes?
Yes, yeah. So I write a couple comics and then a manga series as well.
Yeah.
So the biggest thing for me is your reader is your collaborator. Your video audience gets to just be passive, but
Yes.
you know, your reader becomes a collaborator. So you have to work with your artist, who is your cinematographer would be the best thing to compare it to set up the story in an appropriate way for the reader. And for me, that was extremely difficult, of thinking what is if this were a 10-minute short, what is the perfect shot, the perfect amount of shots that we need in order for the reader to be that collaborator and get the story fully. Hopefully that makes sense.
It does.
Okay,
Yeah, that takes a little bit more deliberate planning. I think this goes back to something that Jason had said earlier in the conversation, in that, you know, you're doing your storytelling beats, but I think you have to be more deliberate about what you are doing. Yeah, because
Right.
Absolutely.
right, because it's not passive. It's not. I don't know how you guys work, but I have a hard time leaving it to the audience to interpret the thing that I drew, because it's very deliberate in its intent. What were you about to say, Si?
I was going to say that you also have to consider how much real estate you have. Like you have this many panels to work with. You can't go over it unless you're willing to increase your pages. So you have to decide, do you want to spend that panel on conversation bubbles, or would you rather, you know, move through that and spend more time on the action that's going to sell the same thing that the conversation might have been saying.
Yeah.
So
True.
Totally valid. Yeah, I get it.
True.
Yeah, as a visual medium, you're supposed to be able to show instead of say.
show don't tell. Yeah.
Show don't tell. I mean, but sometimes it's good to show and tell. So
Yes.
you know, to do like something really cool, but maybe have like an inner monologue or something, or what's happening, or vice versa, whatever. It's a little more fun, and it can push the story a lot faster and further, so you can get more out of your bang for your buck.
Yeah. And what do you have to show? What can't you just tell and sell?
Right.
So.
Like the way I see a lot of things, I'm working in a comic book. I'm working through stuff. You can't show smell. Like, I mean, I could show stinky lines or something. So you could describe it though in thought, and and that'll encompass the reader. Then sees it, and then they, like, if you say what it smells like, they're like, they kind of like get a like, oh wow, this is terrible. Like, it involves all their senses, and you can capture them very well that way.
I'm looking at a piece of your art right now that I can guarantee I know the smell of.
Well,
That is always a hard one, that's for sure.
like we had Rich Ayala on, and his book Roach Balls.
Yeah, you could smell that.
You can smell it.
There's
Yeah,
a
that you can smell.
definite smell attached to every panel that he's drawn, and then, you know, I mean, so I end up finding more about it, and he's like, oh yeah, it's called Cat Shit Island, and I was like, and now that smell just enhanced.
Yeah, but you did have to say it first. I mean, you can draw a
He
smell.
did.
You can draw a smell, but like if you have somebody just walking into a room and like the room is almost empty, they're like, okay, yay. But if you describe what, like, there's an odorous aroma and like they're like, oh, okay,
Yeah.
well apparently there's more to this then. So
Right.
yeah.
True.
So one thing that I was kind of curious of that I totally just forgot as I was
Awesome.
talking.
Good job. All right, so
Good.
this is done then?
That's
We're done.
an amazing point.
That's
Yeah.
good moderating right
Amazing,
there.
Shae.
That is
You're
the
doing a
best.
great job.
This is where the technical difficulties line comes in.
That's exactly what's gonna happen.
I'm a teacher,
No,
and
no,
I'd like to
you
give you a
keep
gold
this
star.
shit. But no, you were saying something like when you were talking about like drawing the vision. When you were speaking earlier, it got me thinking about The Watchmen. When I saw, like when I first reading it, without any words, I see Rorschach immediately investigating the scene of the dead comedian's spot and lifting things up and looking, and like no words are in those panels, and I already got detective. What's he looking for? And like I didn't need any words to tell me that. Yeah. Or even when I read my old Preacher comics, there were some scenes where like when they would walk in, like someone would vomit and the gun would do like this, and I would sometimes you know what's going on in that room by you can get gross things across through the eyes, but like, you can't tell me a room smells sweet or something smells like oranges by like. Yeah, that's a harder one to do. Like negative sense and things like that make more sense.
Hot sour milk and swamp ass is one we use in Bump Back, and I'm very proud of it.
It's good. I like it.
I had something
Thank
to
you.
say, but after hearing that, I'm shaying my way back into that thought. Hold on. Okay, so here it is. I got it.
There it is.
I got it. So I think it was a point that Jason had brought up before, and by the way, I take exception to putting enough sort of like, I want to put things like uncanny, mighty, all in one sentence to describe this scene that's happening to me. So I'm that level of untalented writer. And here's the point. In the case that Gib brought up, I think there was a lot of heavy lifting on the script side for Watchmen, right? There was I've seen a version of an Alan Moore script, and I'm like, wow, this is a lot. This is a lot. And as an artist, I'm like, man, do you have to draw every single one of these things that you're doing? But then you point to Watchmen, and the answer is yes, you draw those things because it's deliberate. There's a level of specificity that has to happen because there is there's a visual hand-holding, right? That is clear with intent in Watchmen. Now, in the case of Preacher, that's I wouldn't say the other end of the spectrum. I think that takes a different kind of craftsman. From the art end, that person clearly understood how to make his characters act to really help that scene. And sometimes you get lucky and you have the person that does know how to make their characters draw, like they know how to draw them emoting. But sometimes you don't, and you just get the vomit scene, right? But it's those little added extras in the back visually that make you go, right, I know how this scene smells, quote unquote.
Yeah, and play to your strengths. Like sometimes though, if you're a writer, sometimes you have to let your artist every now and then dude, do what you want in this panel, ham it up, do what you will, and you got to trust them at some points. And if you're an artist, you gotta be like, dude, I trust what you're gonna do here. Tell me what you need. I'm going to do it specifically, every detail like Alan Moore did in Watchmen, which I've heard horror stories about that script. But, so so every now and then you got to just trust the other person and be like, okay, they're going to carry the story properly with their skill set. I can lean on them here. Or if you're weaker in that regard, or I can't write this part, I need you to draw it out for me and nail it. So, yeah.
Well, and there's another aspect of the visual medium that you don't have as much with just straight writing, and that's specifically in Absolute book 2. You have these characters, and they all have these very angular faces and features, and they all look this very unique way, right? But then you have one panel where you took one of your main characters and you softened a lot of what she had, and she went from being this super badass I'm gonna take everyone down with me kind of thing to being in a moment of being purely vulnerable. And the way that you drew her, everything was a little less harsh. It's not like the features changed, but it wasn't as in your face, like super hard angles and super, you know, massive points and stuff. And what it ended up doing was invoking such an emotion when you got to that panel. And between that and what the story was telling, it just amplified it to being by far my favorite panel out of both books.
Well, thank you.
Was that panel.
Well, and once again, like that's where you don't need to put words in. Like you can carry that, you can convey that emotion without saying it. You can like move the story along, you know, by drawing just one little face a little softer or something like that, and capture the reader and just have them feel something in that one moment. So I mean, now do I try to do it on purpose? Sometimes I accidentally do it. I'm not perfect, you know, and I don't know sometimes what I'm doing because the id just takes over and you're just like, okay, I'm doing things. But every now and then it is deliberate, so you know you can have fun with it. So yeah.
Well, there's also the fact that like because you know what emotion you want to invoke, like your id, like you said, taking over, like your brain just knows this is going to convey that better. And so when you start to draw, you start to see it maybe sooner than in some of the other ones where you're like, she's a badass and she needs to look, you know, big and tough and hard.
Well,
and
let me ask this with sorry, Shae, to interrupt,
No,
but let me ask this with everybody here. When you're like in storytelling, writing, or drawing, do you put on specific music to help you carry the story
Every day.
Like
Always.
Yeah, because
I have to.
yeah, I mean, and with me, I can't listen to anything with words whenever I'm writing. So I put on like Bach or Chopin or something like that. And everybody who knows me, they know I love metal. But like, there's a little surprise. But it captures writing with writing. You need a little bit more, and just straight music. It builds something up in you as to where you can just get into a character's head a little better. If you're hearing somebody else's words, it's not. But when I'm drawing, especially if I'm drawing like an action scene, man, I want to put on Static X, or I want to put on Pantera. I want to put on something that'll just hammer away home stuff. So, you know, I think a lot of things come into play whenever you're creating artwork, stories, or comics. More than just actually just sitting there and doing it. You need to get into a state of mind almost, even if you don't feel like doing it at the time.
Yes.
You got to get your butt down and do it. So music plays heavy part into what I do. And so like that's why a lot of people, like sometimes I'll be on a stream or on a Discord or something, and people be talking and I'm just zoned out because I have my music on, I'm drawing, and I'm like, wait, what was happening in the past 10 minutes? So,
I haven't been listening for 25 minutes. What has been said?
Exactly. So that's why I'm not listening to anything now, because I need to focus on what I say.
Well, I think what you're hitting on, Jason, and in my perspective, my view is art inspires art. You know, so when certain books, I have certain playlists. You know, if I'm working on an Aggie book, it's going to be a lot of female metal musicians. It's like the Pretty Reckless, or in this moment with Maria Brink, or Briggs, Bishop Briggs, and I need this in the background because that's who inspires my character, because the character likes it. I mean, I like it. So, and that's what I want to listen to in the background. I keep it at a pretty low level and keep the thing away a little bit, put it on my phone, put it over there. So I hear it and the words aren't totally distracting, but the tone, the music, the hype, like, that inspires the words. Like I don't do well with like, unless, and I need something, you know, it's not always classical, but I always have to have some kind of music. And then if I switch to another type of book, I need another type of playlist to get me into that mental headspace. And it helps out so much because art inspires art.
Yep. For me, writing, if I'm writing action, I have to have something upbeat, and words don't bother me, because when I'm writing, I am that kind of the words just kind of disappear into the back of my head. It's that rhythm, it's that beat, and that feeling that the music inspires in me that pushes me to write, you know, those really energetic scenes. Definitely agree.
Totally.
So I was gonna say, like, when I do horror, and it's really funny because, like, how you guys are talking about specific music for specific playlists, like if I'm gonna do something that's horror, or something that's grungy, or something that's like kind of heavy emotionally, that's when I start looking towards shit like dubstep. And like just anything that, especially because I'm like Jason, if it's got lyrics, I'm 1,000% lyrics over music. I like songs because I like the lyrics to the songs, and there's songs that I love that have inspired certain writings. Like I have an entire mini comic worked out in my head that is all inspired off of NF's Mansion. So if I'm going to sit down and write that, I might listen to Mansion 1 or 2 times ahead of time to kind of get the thoughts back into my head. But then I have to turn it off and listen to like dubstep or something, because if I listen to NF, I'm going to get caught in his lyrics. And they are either going to infect what I write, which is not what I want, because that's how you become a hack. Straight stealing someone else's shit.
I maybe I'm self-absorbed, but like and maybe I am, but when I listen to like music, sometimes I hear the person singing. I like the tenor of their voice. That's what captures me. I almost never listen to the lyrics half the time, because when the voice and the music I mentally start creating a story, my own visual story based off of what I'm hearing. It might be completely opposite of what the intended lyrics happen to be, and is what inspires me. Then sometimes I'll look at the lyrics and I'm like, oh shit, that's what they said? Oh man,
it's so
way
funny,
different.
because I do the same thing, but I do it lyrics and voice heavy. But I literally, like, I'll listen to some of my favorite songs, and I will, because I love video editing so much, and that's what I wanted to do with my life, like, way early on. I will create in my head, like, this would be a badass music video to go to this. And then I'm like, and it'll never happen, because I don't know actors and I don't know musicians to be like, hey, let me make your music video, because I have a really badass idea, and the music video that you had was okay, but like I totally could have made that better.
I mean, Charlie Manson broke into the house of one of the Beach Boys and they became friends, right? So
You're not
Is
wrong.
that all I gotta do? I don't think that's how that works.
I think you just say, hey, we're friends now, and whether they like it or not, then get what you want.
That's what I do with most of my friends. That's how I have most of my adult friends. I inform them that we
show up at their house.
Canete, I'll be visiting soon.
Well, and that's the thing, is like if I'm doing something scary, I have to do like
That was a
something that
nervous
sounds
laughter,
kinda
by the
angry.
way.
Yeah, I know. That was the driest, most awkward fucking laugh.
I can't walk that far. You're safe. Don't worry about it.
But yeah, like if I was gonna sit around and try to write something like Gibbs' Technomancer series, I think that would just turn to straight techno, like something that's.
What do I listen to? Like honestly, when I listen to that, I listen to a lot of Dropkick Murphys, a lot of Johnny Cash, because every book is based off a Johnny Cash song. If you haven't caught on, so and it's
Spoilers.
well every book is a Johnny Cash, Easter egg, yeah. But
Oh, wait, was the one where spoilers? Was the one where he gets ripped apart? Was that Hurt?
no, it's one. Literally, the song is one piece at a time. It's
God
about
damn it.
It's about a guy who steals like he works at a car plant and he
I love
steals
that
a
song,
piece.
dude.
Yeah, he steals a
Song's
piece of
great.
the car, but he does it over a course of 20 years. So he builds the world's weirdest car. But I imagine, so my character who literally got taken apart one piece at a time in the book. Like I was like, well, I have to use this, but of course I listen to Hurt. I listen to because every Johnny Cash song is about, well, this sucks and I'm in pain, And it's so, and like one like Angels and the Bad Man is a great Johnny Cash song about a guy who's just fucked up in life, So it's some of them are direct, some of them are not, but I need that music, I need that inspiration, because it's like you listen to a blues musician and you're like, oh man. You listen, and it breaks your heart. And
Or
like so,
bluegrass, bluegrass always gets a real strong emotion out of me for whatever reason. Like that. First off, props to anyone who can play a fucking banjo like that, man. Are you serious,
Steve Martin.
Pink spots.
dude? For real, for
Right.
real. It's insane. But yeah, I think it's really interesting because we're over here talking about the topic initially being storytelling through artwork versus just narrative, and all of us have kind of gotten into the music side of it, because it really it's why I like all three mediums. That's why I like novels and comics and movies, is because they all give you something different, and there are certain stories that are best told in one of those mediums. There's some stories that can transcend and go to all three without a problem, but if you pay attention to Batman, a Batman novel that somebody wrote versus a Batman comic, those are different. I don't care if they're telling the same damn story, those are different. They come across entirely differently, the tone, the everything, and then you get into a movie, and that's an entirely different experience as well. And so it depends on what you're trying to kind of convey and get.
Well, take
across
something
it.
like, because I read, but I also like, this is a busy schedule. I listen to a lot of audiobooks just to when I'm driving, when I'm mowing, when I'm doing whatever, doing chores. So I love audiobooks. But think about think about War of the Worlds, that the radio play that freaked out an entire nation because they thought aliens were like. So, but I love that the Foley work in the background, the thunder sound or the crashing or things like that, that evokes
so cool.
right, but that evokes. I love the audio. Like the audio story play, like the old timey, like this brought to you by soap, like whatever. But they always have like the actors, like the old Superman radio plays and things like that. Those, like it creates a picture in your head. We are visual people. We have eyes. We want to create. Like when we read a book, I hope they make this a movie. You already know the story. You just want to see another interpretation. Your eyes naturally want to see this thing come to life.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and I think that, like I said, there's certain things that are best in one of those mediums, and then there's some that can transcend, and you're like, I can appreciate the written as well as like a film adaptation. And hey, I really want to see how someone else does this take that in my head is maybe a little bit muddy and not exactly fleshed out. So I want to see when somebody is forced to address it, like in It, right? You're forced to address the clown spider amalgamation thing at the end. How are you going to do that? And then they did it, and you go, oh, that's lame and not what I was hoping for. And that's not
By the way,
all.
Shae, thanks, because I never saw it.
Oh, don't worry. It's
It's
not
much
that
better
great.
that they just poorly addressed that than addressed other things from that book. So,
Yeah, you mean the love scene? Yeah, that was messed
the
up.
child orgy. Yeah, probably
Yeah,
not
yeah.
good.
Yeah, that's king. Like everything always ended up in a weird situation. But when you take something like
Freud did have fun with him.
the Game of Thrones, the first couple of books and the television show were very faithful adaptations, or fairly faithful adaptations. As of course as they went along,
First
we
one,
can
for
argue
sure.
the merits. But it's like you felt it brought the text to life, and you loved it, and it brought it to that visual space that all writers kind of like. I'd love to sell my soul to like just somebody that brings something to a visual medium. So
Just don't do it to Netflix, please. That's all I ask. Netflix will fuck it up.
whoever will pay for my mortgage, I don't give a shit.
Perfectly so. Perfectly
Student
so.
loans, man.
That's what I say.
You're,
Pay my
you're a
student loans.
sellout, but not
Pay
cheap.
my student loans.
No, I'm a dirty whore, and I will sell it to anybody.
Last week we had him in a Red Valkyrie bikini painting Krager's house for $100. Like,
Oh.
and I don't even know if that $100 is going to Gib, to be honest.
Digital
Those,
pimps.
those
I'll get a
terms were
fancy
never
toupee.
defined, so that $100 could be anywhere.
They were not,
That's-
unfortunately.
They were just throwing around
not
large
Venmo
sums
me
of money,
shit.
and I was like, I don't know if this is it. We need a contract. I need deliberate use.
Well, at some
Always
point,
get a contract, folks. Always. Yeah. So, Eric, what about you? Do you have any like certain music or anything that you try to listen to?
The reason why I kept I was like, I don't listen to music at all. it is,
But that's still
it
plays
is
into
the
it, though.
it is that the front end of distracting to me. I think it's because I didn't have much of a connection to music in the beginning, since the beginning from growing up, right? I didn't really get into music until much later. So that intimate sort of like upbringing that it holds your hand through to whatever sort of like transformative space as your tastes change. I didn't have that advantage as a kid. I didn't have that experience. So often I refer, like the thing that's always playing in the background for me are movies. I write things sometimes to my own detriment in 3-act structures because that's what I'm used to. And in comics doesn't always immediately facilitate that, right? So especially when you're doing like a 6-issue miniseries or like an extended series, right? So yeah, for me, so when you guys are talking like, oh, music moves me to do this and I can't have words in it because I focus in on it, I'm all like, this is neat. But I'm looking at you from behind like a plexiglass window because it's
You're like
unrelatable
tap
to
tap
me.
tap dance. Just take tap tap tap.
What else does music do for you guys? This is cool. I'm over here.
Tap, tap,
That's my
tap.
role on this panel,
I
by
think
the
it's
way, is to
key.
just be like,
An
I don't know what
observer.
I'm doing.
I was an addict to like original MTV. I love seeing what these visual mediums to an auditory format brought. And sometimes you got good videos, sometimes you got weird ones, sometimes you like the ones that stick in your head forever. And music was my escape from whatever was going on in life, and sometimes it was good music, sometimes it's bad music, and I have no shame in my music. I like everything over the spectrum. Like I'll listen to Sabaton one day or like some British pop,
taste.
because if it makes me happy, it makes me happy. Life's too short to be judgmental. So
Yeah,
no, fuck you.
I'm definitely, I was like growing up, I was that emo edgelord child that was like, Linkin Park gets me, and it's like, no, they don't. They really don't. They just said some angsty shit in a song, and you are convincing yourself that that's what you're experiencing, and it's not. And now that I'm older and I look back on it, I'm like, I still love, if Linkin Park comes on, I will still know every single lyric to
My
to
wife and I
almost every song.
well, when Chester passed away, we were torn up because it was like, again, my wife and I I'm a little bit older, but so that hit me when I was in my early 20s.
Yeah.
Was Linkin Park came around, but again, your early 20s are just as angsty as your teenage years because you're trying to find meaning and derive meaning from whatever
It's
in
worse
life.
because you think that you're grown.
It is. It's kind of like Saturday Night Live. From the ages of 17 to 24 is when you think music was good and when Saturday Night Live was good because your brain is formulating these opinions of what is quality. And it's always 17 to 24. I swear to God, whatever that range is, that's what Saturday Night Live is good, and that was the best music ever.
Yeah.
Your best Bond.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, that's so funny. So what other kind of things do you guys look towards when you're trying to craft a good story? Is there anything else?
Other people's stories that are better.
Yeah, same. 100%.
I will
take a look at the last thing that made me go, whoa, that is a great approach to that, especially when it comes to panel to panel. I think whenever I get hung up on overly simplifying my page layouts because I want that barrier to entry to be as narrow as possible or as thin as possible, because sometimes I see, especially in the kind of genre that I'm telling stories in, which is like superhero stuff, people get so fancy with their layouts, not realizing it doesn't need to be. I think there's obviously you want to leverage the medium. You want to do things that only comics can provide, but not to the detriment of storytelling and clarity. Yeah. And so I often take a step back and say what am I overdoing? Because look how fucking cool this is, man. Look how let's all geek out over this page layout and look how this one's breaking the panel and blah 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 blah. It's so masturbatory. Oh, I love it. But then you and then you hand it over to somebody, and then they go I can't. And my wife is like a really great, honest, but also awful human being, because she'll tell me straight to my face how poorly I'm executing an idea or a set of beats, right? She's a storyboard artist by craft, and so she is always in the brain's mindset of this is not clear. I don't know what's happening, right? You could have done this in 3 panels. You could have landed the emotion. Oh, here's an emotive sort of pose that you could have gone into. And so when I see that in other people's books, I'm still of the old school. I almost want to rip it out and put it into a reference binder. When you do these kinds of scenes, this is what it is. And then I'll do it. And she's like, what did you do this for?
Yeah,
and I said, because I saw it in X, Y, and Z book. And then she'll go and dissect where I got that image from. And she's like, you're landing that emotion because of the color. You're landing that emotion because of the palette. I'm like, oh, right. Okay, so it's not, the drawing is okay, but the palette really helped. The lighting really helped. So yeah, that's for me. Anytime I go through comics, not so much American comics, because again, you want to talk about masturbatory, but other comics out there, right? I go into it and I'm ripping out pages.
Maybe if it's hate masturbation.
Hate masturbation.
Hate masturbation.
Yeah.
That's my next series. Thank you very much.
That's also my new band. That's perfect.
Hate
I'll be
masturbation.
listening
Oh my
to the band.
God.
I don't know if I'll be buying that next series, but yeah.
I like the first track on that
I'm gonna
album, "Tug It
convince
Till It
you.
Bleeds," was great.
No, but you bring up a good point. When I always think of this in comic format is storyboarding, because with storyboarding in movies,
100%.
you want to hit beats, you want to hit pivotal points, usually when it comes to that. So it drives the story along. So that's where the writers, being a script writer, really comes in handy, because you know how to work with the storyboard artist or something like that. That's a powerhouse tool to have, as being a script writer and going into comics, because you kind of have an advantage in a way.
Amen.
Yeah, this is the size point earlier, right? Which is you only have so much real estate. What do you want to choose to focus on that really helps you land the narrative? I'm sorry, I cut you off, Paul.
Paul.
Oh, no. I was just agreeing.
Keep agreeing with me. It's fine. I'm right all the time, so it's good.
Oh man.
No, I appreciate how simple it was. Other than just making sure I'm working with my reader appropriately, being from my background has been a huge blessing, and that's why I know a lot of people who do screenwriting get into this is because they want to get their stories out there faster, or at least some of their stories. And if I have to tell a story with demonically possessed toasters going through an existential crisis in order to do that, I'm happy to do that.
It needs to be told.
It needs to be told. It needs to be told.
Well, and it's easier to hire an artist instead of 12 actors, a director.
True. I will say Bumpback cost me more than the original El Mariachi did for Robert Rodriguez over time. Yeah. So, it's up there.
Well, and not only that, you can cast whoever you want if it's in a comic.
Absolutely.
So yeah.
Here's what I've seen, and I don't know if you guys have any insight into this, but the transition from screenwriter to comic book scriptwriter is significantly more seamless than the going in the opposite direction. As a comic book writer, understanding number 1 to 3 act structure is a very difficult handle to grasp. The Save the Cat version. You know what I mean? Like the understanding of this is what 10 minutes into the movie we're going to need this. 60 minutes into the movie we're going to need this. I think it's because they partition comics in a very specific way, or in certain dum-dums case they don't know how to partition it, so that it leads into something they don't understand how to build momentum. And by way of quote unquote formula, screenplays know how to do that better.
Right. We've discussed this a lot on the show about how one of the most consistent failings in indie comics is pacing the story.
Oh, dear Lord, yes.
So much.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
No, go ahead, Paul.
There's been great story builders across the board, but I will say I love a lot of people on indie comics Twitter, and I would never openly blast their book or anything like that.
But so now's your chance.
I won't tell we do reviews, but when we do reviews,
I feel like it always comes down to that. That being said,
a lot of you.
But there's one particular creator who I really like as a person. I know he's much further along in the more visual content area, but obviously this is video content, film and media of that sort. But I read one of their more recent books, and it was like whiplash. It was so jarring because comics, for whatever reason, will take a 3-mile leap in the opposite direction out of nowhere. Yes, you're doing the page turns and whatnot, but sometimes those are just silly at some point because you're trying to burn through your story.
If you have a gripping enough story, you don't need a massive page turn to get me to keep reading. I'm invested in the story, I'll keep reading. And when people are like, oh, but how do I make sure you turn the page to the next one? I was like, no, that's when the page turns really come at very specific parts, just like Eric said. It still comes in a 3-act structure. That should be, if you're doing a page turn, that should be when it is.
Yeah.
It's not just whenever, because I want to make sure they're going to keep turning the page. If you're telling a good story, they will. If you're not telling a good story, rewrite it.
Yes.
I've heard that conversation with a few comic book artists who are like, oh man, you could have done it on the page turn here. I'm like, get out of here. You know what I mean? You're like, this is I akin it to this is like a car. You're trying to make me highlight the air conditioning. You know what I mean? Stop it. Is it go fast? Does it, that you don't have to fix it a lot? That's my issue is to tell you the good story, and you're talking to me about a utility that doesn't make the story better, at least not in such a way that you guys are overemphasizing it. So I'm not a big fan. Clearly, If I haven't made it deliberately clear, I'm not a fan of.
It needs
the
to not be one of the
page turn.
first things that they learn
Exactly.
with comic
It
writing.
shouldn't
It
be.
needs to be something
Yeah.
they learn later on that they can use after they have learned how to tell a halfway decent
Absolutely.
story.
Well, even with my second book, I screwed up but didn't. Like, because of the way I did things, I initially was going to do it through, like, Image or Dark Horse or whatever, and it was going to be, like, 20, 23-page books or whatever. And so I had the first 3 laid out that way, but the second half to the second book, I didn't. So there was more pages to it, but I wanted it staple bound. So I had to make sure that like, the story contained, like, so many pages, blah, blah, blah. But I had to cut out things, and when it came to certain page turns, I'm like, it would have worked. Yeah, it would have worked really cool if it was a page, but does the story still work without it? And it's like, yeah,
Yes.
it does. Like, there was even a guy who gave a critique, and I actually respect it, and he's right for the most part, where this one image would have worked great and better probably as a 2-page spread. I'm like, yeah, but you still get the convey of the emotion with just the one,
Yes.
it being on the one page. Like, he's not wrong. Like, it's a visual medium, it would look dope, get out, as like a 2-page spread or even like a 3-page, like, scene, but I could convey the emotion just as fine, powerful enough if I do the panel sequencing right on one page.
I'm with you. Did it break because you didn't have a double page spread or you didn't put the page turn? And that might oftentimes I would argue to the opposite. Like, no, if it works and it works, it would be nice icing on top. It would be nice, a little bit of extra, but it wasn't for the lack of planning.
Right.
It just would have been nice. I don't remember somebody ever going up to like a Dark Knight, to a Dark Knight Rises, Dark Knight Returns, and was like, this fucking book sucks, there's not enough page turns are happening. And I was like,
I still maintain it should have been a 12-page fold-out, Jason.
Okay, I'll get back to work.
Well,
No, I mean, like, I respect his opinion, and I think he was right as far as a comic book medium goes. But
yes,
I also had to constrain things, so it was.
But so part of the problem that I think a lot of people that are reviewing comic books come across is that they judge it based on what's in their mind of what it could have been, as opposed to what it is.
Amen.
Look at what it is, because it could have been a 80-page graphic novel. It's not. That's not what it is. So you can't get it in your head that I'm going to judge like a 24-page book on what I would expect out of an 80-page graphic novel, and then start dinging a 24-page book for not hitting certain stretches.
I just want to say, because I don't want him to think I'm like saying
No.
I don't want him to think I'm bashing him. I respected his opinion, and I think
I'm not saying specifically with you. I'm just saying
I'm not gonna.
that brings up a really good point, though, because a lot of people when they go into reviewing comics, they go into reviewing them based on a preconceived notion in their head, or this would have been dope if it was this big, and then that could have gone on a t-shirt, and that would have been cool to have.
They fall into the trap of a fanfic writer, which is, how would I have done this better?
Lord,
Instead of,
there you go.
It's a great way to put it.
It doesn't have to be fanfic. I mean, like, it's just, I have so many indie author friends that when I'm reading their stuff, it sucks because especially if you know the person and you're not a fan like of what they've written, and you get creative ways of saying, you don't want to say I would have done it better, I would have done it different, but I try to judge it for what it is. But there are many times like your inciting incident comes within the first chapter, you haven't even set up the rules, or you spent the first 10 chapters gilding the lily about how great your new world is, but you haven't introduced a character or an inciting incident. It's literally like the 3-act structure. By chapter 10, if you have not given me truthfully, by chapter 5, what is this book about? Give me the inciting incident.
Right.
Set your characters up, blah blah blah, and then boom, the Maltese Falcon drops, the arc, whatever the shit is. You need the thing by a certain point because our brains are geared through modern storytelling to like, I need this beat roughly within this period of time just to keep the brain going and going and going. Because your prose could be great, your visuals could be great, but if the story's not taking the person somewhere, all the flashy stuff in the world, we can't fix that. So,
I tell you though, Gib, there's plenty of people who push back on that.
Say that again, sir?
There's plenty of people who push back on that concept, that structure.
Yeah.
They somehow push back on it as under the concept that it's limiting. And I go, I think you're looking at it completely differently than
they are.
Like, you're not leveraging it,
Right.
There's different versions. I mean, it's all the Conrad's, Hero with a Thousand Faces, or the monomyth, or even the guy who did Communities, Dan Harmon. He's got his story circle versions, but they're all. You need you don't. it doesn't have to. They have to find the magic sword by this point, but they need something expressed what this character needs versus what they want, and then they need to cross certain thresholds. And it doesn't need to be a tick mark, but there are these loose. The reason, like, the story of Achilles or Frodo have been ubiquitous and eternal is because they tend to fall into these certain predictable patterns, but you can subvert expectations, but just keep it going in a direction so that people understand it. And
it has to have a structure, otherwise the thing falls apart.
Because I make nothing like, for example, when I said earlier, like, I look to better writing to I love TV more than anything else, TV and movies, because I'm just a visual person, and I love American Horror Story. I've never liked one season to completion, but the setups are always amazing, and I'm like, damn,
the setups are good. It's the halfway
they
point.
Never the halfway point. They never stick the landing, and it doesn't matter. I still I'm baffled by the creativity that goes into these projects. Like, wow, that is an amazing setup. That's an amazing idea. Like, how high were you when you came up with this? Because give me some, because that is awesome. But then inevitably they always do what they always do. Something happens at the midpoint, and they never stick the landing.
Well, so this is actually something that was a funny point that I wanted to bring up. Is you guys were talking about how going from storyboard to comics is a more natural transition. So I'm coming from more of a video editing background when it comes to storytelling, because that's where my passion was for so long. And I would argue that goes very closely with storyboarding, because while I didn't sit down and actually draw out storyboards, I had to still have those beats, and you still had to know the timing, and you still had to know how to get things to get from point A to point B efficiently, without feeling rushed, without feeling like they took too long, in order for it to really sell what you were doing. And granted, the stuff that I did, it was, I remember I did one thing that almost got me suspended.
What?
We did PSAs. We all had to do PSAs. And so a PSA is supposed to be 30 seconds or less, and you're supposed to very quickly hit your points on why this is important and what the resource is that you're pushing or whatever, right? So mine was 1 minute and 10 seconds long or something along those lines. It was a little bit longer than what it was supposed to be, but I basically took Nickelback's song Never Again, grabbed 2 people from the drama department and the drama instructor to do stage makeup on them, and filmed various scenes of domestic violence that ended up with us, like, one of the guys had to patch drywall because he was so in character. He swings at her, and like they had it timed out. Like, they knew each other really well. So he was like, take so many steps. When you hear my foot hit loud on this last step, duck, because I'm going to swing at your head. And they did it beautifully, but he put his fist through the wall. So like, and he like broke chairs and stuff. It was very effective. And I edited all together with lyrics from Never Again specifically, and then I showed it to my teacher, and he was like, so we're gonna play it, and we're not going to tell the administration first. And I was like, so I'm getting suspended? And he was like, no, I got your back. So we played it, and I was the one that was in charge of running the actual like newsroom at the time, and all I see is the principal comes back into the room, is talking with my instructor, and then I hear a knock on the window, and the principal looks at me and he points, and he was like, so I was just like, and I'm about to get suspended, so everybody enjoy, somebody else please take over. And like, I went back in, and the principal was like, so we're gonna play it for the rest of this week, and then I never want to see it again. And he was like, and don't ever do this again. And I was like, no, noted. But like, it in that whole, I had this whole thing worked out where I was like, these are the beats that I want to show, because I'm tired of people shying away and only showing like the bruises after, right? Or not paying attention to all of the different ways that domestic violence can come about. And so I choreographed, these are the scenes that we're going to do. This is how I want it to look. And bless them, they acted insanely well for it. But
and the makeup was better than Amber's.
The makeup was phenomenal. Because when we were driving, the girl, like, we were driving to go to, my mom worked at a medical center, so we were driving to go to a clinic because I was going to film a scene where she comes walking in, basically, and the woman jumps out of her seat like, oh my gosh, what happened? while we were driving there, she was like, I have to put sunglasses on. And I go, why? And she goes, the amount of looks from the other drivers. Like, they were
dang.
freaked out. And so she, like, has glasses on. She, like, put her hair down so it would, like, hide. I was like, dude, you seriously look like a battered woman right now trying to hide it from everybody else.
That
It
also,
was ridiculous.
but that's great. But it also leads back into like different ways of storytelling.
Yeah.
Because like you showed everything, you showed the power of what it does and what it can do. But also the mind can do that as well. Whenever like you just like you said, you a lot of people are doing just showing the after effects and that was it. But sometimes when you fill it in with your own head, it sometimes can be more brutal and more devastating than
Absolutely.
what like somebody's trying to show. So it can drive a story. You know, you depend now. It could be a crutch too. If you show too much,
Yep.
you're like, all right, this is a little overkill.
That's what
But if
happens
you-
with horror
yeah.
all the time. They show
if
too
you don't
much
show
and then it's not
enough,
scary.
you're like, okay, well,
Snuff
what the
film
crap?
time with Shae. You know, like, all right, now really punch him in the
Too far.
face. And
Too far.
Too far. Too far. Yeah.
She's a grandmother
so-
of 3. Go for it.
Oh my god.
Yeah, but like watching.
This
like,
is a high school.
Yeah, that's why like watching like other artists or writers and talk about like how they can do stuff and like I still go back to Todd's words where he's like, you know, he saw a lot of artists just drawing the action. He likes to draw the before punch and then show the guy get thrown through a window because what you see in your head sometimes is a lot more impactful than what he can just draw them like getting hit in the face. So that always stuck with me, and I do it from time to time. So you got to show the action sometimes. It's fun. People want to see it. It's not fun, but you know what I mean. Like domestic violence isn't fun. Let me put it that way. But you want to see like a samurai cut in half a bad guy. Like it's cool. It's fun. You know, you like that. But sometimes if you just show the blood splatter afterwards, you're like, what did he do to this dude? And it's in your head. So you got to know how to use those weapons to your advantage when driving a story forward.
Absolutely. Well, you know, I think that we covered this topic really well. So
barely
Gib,
scratched the surface. I don't know. What
just tiny bit. It's okay. This is only episode 3. There's so many more episodes
Okay.
coming. So,
There's the topic.
Gib, do you
I
want
do.
to?
I got him.
All right, we're gonna go with wrap up time with Gibby.
All right. So let's see. Let's start with who wants to go first?
What is this?
This is a random question I'm going to give you. We just want your reaction, okay?
Okay.
Paul go first.
So who said who wants to go first?
Paul goes first.
Paul goes first.
I mean,
Jason's
I feel
I
like
want to
he
hear about it.
No, I just feel like he hasn't really gotten to say much.
Yeah, and he's not on camera,
Yeah.
so he should have to say.
Yeah.
There was like a 3-second delay, and it was really bothering me. So
All right, Paul. You're on vacation with some friends. You're visiting some ancient ruins. While joking around, you find what appears to be an altar. You didn't see this before. One of your friends bumps into it, and all of a sudden becomes possessed by the spirit of a long-dead, powerful entity. This bee immediately turns on the other friends and possesses them as well, turning them into half-human, half-animal thralls. They all look at you. You have one weapon of choice, 3 books, and 1 luxury item. What do you do?
one weapon of choice. Oh, son of a biscuit. All right, books. Their eyes were watching God because that'll torture them. Let's see here. Henri de Balzac's Lost Illusions to diminish their spirit. And then can the Epic of Gilgamesh count?
It's a book. I'm sure you can get it on Amazon right
awesome.
now.
That'll be heavy enough. If Hobby Lobby will give it to me. And then weapon, freaking, the overwhelming weight of depression, and then luxury item, I don't know, jet ski.
You gotta have fun.
And then,
Jet ski, just so he can have fun on the water.
have fun.
Not for any other reason.
You gotta have fun.
And yeah, I think the proper mix of those things will make the
Lead to your
entity end me quicker. Because I won't have much to fight with, and maybe if I had brought the jet ski to the party, maybe the entity will just turn me into half whatever monster thing, and we can move on with our lives and take over the world.
I accept it. Well done.
Thank you.
All right, Jason, you're up. You ready?
Yeah.
You wake up and you're falling. You quickly realize that you're in the air, and all of a sudden, the parachute you didn't realize was on you opens. And you look down. There's an island. When you land, you discover that there are video cameras in the trees. And you hear sounds. And looking around, there's these strange mutant animal hybrids. And boy, do they look hungry. You have one weapon of choice, 3 books, and 1 luxury item. What do you do?
It's like another snuff film. What's happening? Snuff film island.
I realize that I'm in Fortnite, and I spawn a lightsaber as my weapon of choice.
Perfect.
And a book I have is Eat, Pray, Love.
Excellent.
Yeah. How to Draw the Marvel Way, and the Kama Sutra.
Hot.
And a luxury item. Yeah, a jet ski.
I love it.
Yes.
I love
it. Yes.
You can't
A
be
man of taste and quality.
can't be unhappy on a jet ski. That's just a rule.
Oh my gosh, I love you guys. Well, thank you everyone who tuned in to watch this premiere with our amazing guests, Mr. Jason Bascom, Mr. Paul Tucker. It was a phenomenal episode with many twists and turns, and not really sure where we ended up, but it's great. It was fantastic. And of course, thank you to our wonderful panel. You guys are amazing as always. Please do not forget to like, share, and subscribe to Red Valkyrie, and maybe become a member. Thank you so much for watching. Let's catch you guys next time.
Thanks for joining us for another episode of Writing Prose. Please like, share, and subscribe if you've enjoyed our content. You can also become a channel member or visit our merch store to help support us. We're currently accepting fan-submitted stories for anonymous, on-air review later in the season. Send your submissions to redvalkyrie.writingprose@gmail.com. Thanks, and we'll see you next time.